Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Joyce from Central for Corporate and Community Development, CCD Utah. Today, we are presenting a webinar titled Developing Social and Emotional and Ethical Literacy Through C Learning by Brandon Ozawade Silva. Let me introduce the background of him. Brandon is the Associate Director for C Learning at the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics at Emory University. He holds doctorates from the University of Oxford and Emory University. C Learning is a worldwide K-12 and higher education program to introduce social, emotional, and ethical learning into education. That's all from the introduction. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box in your Zoom control panel. I will bring them up during the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. To all participants, kindly sign in your attendance in the link posted in the same chat box in the Zoom control panel. And now, without further ado, let us turn the time over to Brandon.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Joyce, for that lovely introduction. I hope everybody can hear me well, and welcome all of you. Very happy to be here, and I appreciate the invitation to speak. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if this works. Is that looking good? So I'm happy to be presenting to you today on a program at Emory University, where I work in Atlanta, Georgia. And the program is called Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning. It's a free education program for students and teachers in primary school, secondary school, and higher education, meaning college or university. I'm going to be, it's a very comprehensive program, so I'm just going to be sharing a few parts of it, and we'll try and do it experientially so that you get to experience a bit of the program and what it feels like. So I'm going to be asking you to participate in the chat if you're able to. So feel free to type in the chat your comments and any questions you might have. So just to get started, every C Learning lesson that we do starts with a check-in. And that is just a way of allowing everybody to have a voice in the room, checking in with everybody. So for our check-in, I'd like to ask you all, what is a source of strength for you? Or what has been a source of strength for you now or in the past week, in the past month? What has been helping you get by? And if you could take a moment to think about that and then write your response in the chat, that would be great. So, and I hope you all have the ability to write in the chat. I think you should. I'm not seeing anybody. Oh, okay, here we go. I see the first one. That's good. I'm glad that people are able to share. So family, mental health, my years of professional experience, family, the fact that people are counting on me. That's a great one. My children. Food, generosity, family, religion. Many thanks to all of you who are sharing. Health. For those of you who are just entering right now, what we're doing is we're just doing a brief check-in and we're sharing in the chat whatever has been a source of strength for you or whatever has been helping you get by. This past year and a half with the pandemic has been very challenging for most of us, and for people around the world, it's been a very challenging time. And it's easy for us to focus on the difficulties. It's easy for us to focus on what has been going wrong, or easy for us to focus on our fears or doubts or uncertainties. So it's nice to take a moment to focus on the things that have been going right, the things that have been helping us, the things that have been supporting us. And as you think about these different things, whether it's what you shared or what other people have shared in the chat, and I hope you can all see the chat. If you can't, there might be a way to check in your options to bring up the chat so you can see it. As you think about what has been helping you get by, let's just take a moment to bring that to mind, whatever it is that you listed that's been supporting you. And take a few moments in silence to just notice what happens on the inside as you think of that. In other words, does your body respond in any way as you think about what's been helping you get by? And if you do notice anything happening in your body as you think about your source of strength, then feel free to note that in the chat as well. For example, I'm actually taking a road trip right now. I'm actually technically on vacation, although I'm happy to be with you all. And I've been taking a 2-week road trip through the US, visiting friends and family. And it's been great to travel. It's the first time my wife and I have traveled in a year, over a year and a half. And as I think about that, that's been a source of strength for me. And as I bring that to mind and I pay attention to my body, I notice that I let out a deep sigh and I felt my body relax a little bit. So we're going to return to this very simple activity a little bit later, and talk about why activities like this are part of the C-Learning program. But I'd also like to talk about another aspect of the C-Learning program. In C-Learning, we try to combine the body and the mind and the heart. And so we just did a little activity that kind of brings something to mind, and then we notice what happens in our body. We're going to talk a little bit about the mind also. So I'd like to do another little activity with you and talk a little bit about perceptual illusions as a metaphor for cognitive illusions that we'll talk about. But let's start with perceptual illusions. So we have some gray circles and some orange circles. Hopefully you can see them. Which orange circle looks larger to you? The one on the left, the one on the right, or you think they're the same size? So put this in the chat. You can put same, you can put left, right, you can put the letters A, B, C. A lot of people saying the same. Oh, most people saying the same. Okay, some people saying the right one looks larger. To me, the right one looks larger, to be honest. But most people saying the same. Few people saying the right. No one thinks the left one is larger. Somebody said it depends on how we look at it. I like that response. Okay, I'm going to show you another image. Hopefully most people have had the chance to respond to that. Let's look at these lines. We have 3 lines. Now, ignoring the arrows, the arrow signs on the ends of the lines, which line looks the longest to you? The top line, the middle line, or the bottom line? Or do you think they're all the same? I feel like some of you have seen these perceptual illusions before. Which line looks the longest? So take a look at the 3 lines. We're just looking at the middle part of the lines. Which looks the same? Oh, sorry, which looks the longest? Top, middle, or bottom? Or they're all the same? So now, Are you all saying the same because they look the same length to you, or because you know they're the same length? I'm curious. Do any of these lines look the longest? Ah, yeah, so you're being honest. So you know that they all have to be the same. But to most people, of course, B looks the longest, the middle one looks the longest. And then the bottom one looks a little bit longer, and the top one looks the shortest. And now most of you already know this is an illusion. It also says on the top of the screen, a perceptual illusion. So I probably shouldn't have said that. I should have been a little more tricky. Does anyone want to put in the chat why most people would say that the middle line looks the longest? Does anybody know why? Or anyone want to speculate why we might not see them all the same? And incidentally, most of you said they're the same, and you're correct. They're all the same, actually, as you can see from this, the lines that have come. Yeah, so the arrows guide our eyes and kind of fool our brain into thinking that certain lines are longer than others. And that's a persistent perceptual illusion that we have. So in C-learning, we're not so much interested in perceptual illusions as we are in cognitive illusions, which is how not just our eyes play tricks on us, but really it's our brain playing a trick on us. And our brains can play tricks on us in many different ways. And this can create problems for us. So we don't just have perceptual illusions, we also have cognitive illusions or cognitive distortions. The perceptual illusions show us that the way the world appears to us is not always the way it really is. The way things seem is not always the way they are, right? So appearance and reality can be different. And it's important for us to realize that, because when we take the appearance, how things seem to us, and we trust that and we believe in that, that can get us into trouble. So we use the term thinking traps to talk about cognitive distortions, not just perceptual ones. And here are a couple examples of thinking traps. They might be familiar to you. I have the worst luck in the entire world. So something goes wrong and you think, oh, I just have the worst luck. You know, nobody's as unfortunate as I am. We fail at something, like I just failed that math test. And we think, I'm no good. I'm no good. I'm never going to be able to learn this. I'm no good at school. I might as well quit. So we give up on ourselves. We lose confidence. Or something happens and we start to worry. She's late. It's raining. She's hydroplaned. And her car's upside down in a ditch. So we start to worry and our mind starts thinking, what if, and it goes on and on. And all of a sudden we're having anxiety. So these are examples of thinking traps. Thinking traps are cognitive distortions. They're examples of how our minds can play tricks on us and make us believe things that are irrational, but they seem real to us at the time. So I wonder if this is something any of you have encountered yourself, either in yourself or in others. Is there a thinking trap that you fall into? And if you can think of something, feel free, and you're willing to share it, feel free to share it in the chat. It doesn't have to be anything big. It can be a small thing. I can give you an example from my own life. A thinking trap I sometimes fall into is if I'm late for a meeting, I think I can get very anxious, thinking that if I arrive late, everyone's going to be upset with me or something's going to go wrong. There's no rational reason to think anything's going to go wrong. But I tend to get anxious, thinking that something might go wrong just from me being late. Once I was rushing to a meeting, and I got there and I realized that I actually even got the meeting time wrong. I thought it was an hour earlier and I ended up just waiting around for an hour. Nothing happened. So can any of you think of a of a thinking trap that you tend to fall into. Or it could be a thinking trap that you've noticed other people falling into. If you can think of something, feel free to share it in the chat. So we have some great examples. I have a mousy appearance. No one will notice me, so I may as well keep quiet. That's a great one. And I'm not making any progress. There's no point in continuing. So a lot of times, that's a very common one. If we don't see progress right away, we think no progress is being made. And of course, that's usually not true, right? The planning fallacy. Maybe you could, that's Wang Suibin is saying that. Maybe you could explain what the planning fallacy is. That would be great. Han Xin is saying, if I think my son doesn't eat, he will starve. So that's a good one. Probably he can go for a little time before starving, but maybe anxiety comes up. Someone that you're trying to call, but they're not answering the call and they're staying alone. So we keep thinking if they're in danger. Yeah, that's a great example. I was retrenched and looking for a job. I couldn't find a job, so I started thinking I wouldn't be able to get one. Yeah, so the fear and the what if thinking starts. These are all great examples. Thanks so much. The interesting thing is once we start thinking about thinking traps, they're kind of standard. There are a lot of different thinking traps we can have, but they kind of fall into a few standard categories. So once we start recognizing them as thinking traps, we can actually be better equipped in dealing with them. And a great one from Angela, if I can't do something well, is it worth wasting my time doing it? Yeah, so sometimes we think there's no point doing something unless I can do it really well. But that's not necessarily true a lot of the time. I couldn't finish this in time. I'm not a hardworking person. So this is a great one because we can be really tough on ourselves. We can think that if we fail in any small way, rather than seeing failure as a part of our common humanity, that everybody fails sometimes, we can't be perfect, we're human beings. We might think that our failure is somehow a sign that we're lacking something, that it's a sign of a character defect, where I'm not a hardworking person, there's something wrong with me. So these are all great ones. Thank you so much for sharing. So here are just a few categories. This is not exhaustive. There could be many, many more thinking traps that we come up with, but here are a couple common ones that most of us fall into some of these thinking traps, at least some of the time. So one is polarized thinking, all or nothing thinking. So it's either one way or it's completely the other way. You know, the light is either on or off. It's either black or white. It's all or nothing. When, of course, almost everything in reality is more nuanced than that. Another is overgeneralizing. So something goes wrong, and then we just overgeneralize. My wife and I were just talking about this actually. Since we're traveling, we're on the road. So you go to a new town, a new place, and maybe you have a bad experience there. Maybe someone's rude to you. You know, you go into a restaurant and the waiter is rude to you. And then you say, oh, everybody in this city is rude. I never want to come back to this city. Well, you know, one person was rude to you. There are rude people everywhere. It could have been, but you know, you might not go back to that place for a long time. My parents, my father was in Paris. Someone was rude to him, and he didn't go back to Paris for 30 years because he thought people in Paris are so rude. When he finally went back to Paris, he fell in love with it and thought it was great, and now he only wants to go to Paris. So it was just one experience, but we tend to overgeneralize. Catastrophizing, which some people mentioned, we start to think some horrible thing is going to happen. Fundamental, we don't need to go into all of these, it would take too long also, but fundamental attribution error is one that's been studied a lot in psychology. Someone cuts you off on the street, and rather than thinking, well, they're in a hurry or there was some reason they didn't see me, we say they're a terrible driver. Like, look at that person, they cut me off, they're just a terrible driver. But when we cut somebody off, which most of us have done if we drive a car, when we cut someone off, we don't suddenly say, oh, I'm a terrible driver, I cut someone off. We say, oh, I didn't see that person, or I was distracted, or we look at the situation rather than attributing it to the person. So fundamental attribution means we tend to attribute things to characteristics of people, including ourselves, and ignore the situation that might have led to that. So these are all just examples of thinking traps. Now the question is, and I'll just read the chat. It says, my son said, I always spoil things in the house. I hate myself. I'm a useless person. I'm only creating trouble to the family. Yeah, this is sad, and unfortunately, there are a lot of children who do have feelings like this. So we kind of use some simple examples of thinking traps, but thinking traps can be very, very difficult for children and young people. They can really create a lot of struggles, even leading to depression and very serious problems. So the question is, should we look at thinking traps, since they can be trivial or they can be very serious and very dangerous? Should we look at them, and should we try to address how we can overcome them? So here are just a couple ways that we try to address thinking traps in the C Learning program, which is a social emotional learning program. One is by talking about it, so having a dialogue about it. So sometimes if we fall into a thinking trap is an irrational distortion of reality. And if we can talk to somebody else who isn't experiencing that thinking trap, just through sharing our thinking, that person can help us see things a little bit more clearly, with a little more distance. Another way we can approach thinking traps is through critical thinking, right? If thinking traps are irrational, then if we address them rationally, we can start to unpack them. We can start to notice them also. So rather than just giving in right away to the thinking trap, we can say, oh, I know what's happening. I'm falling into this thinking trap. So we learn to recognize it. Science can really help, scientific literacy. And I know this is a festival on mind and STEM. Science can help us because, again, thinking traps are about mistaking appearance for reality. So the more we understand reality, the more we can see that these are fallacies or illusions or distortions that we're falling into. We can understand, if we go deeper into science, we can even understand how evolution, the evolution of our brain and the evolution of our psychology has actually conditioned us sometimes to misperceive reality, because sometimes misperceiving reality helps us survive better. A great example of that is negativity bias, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. So our tendency to focus on threats and what's negative rather than focusing on the positive can help us in some circumstances to stay alive, but it can also create problems, because if we're only focusing on the negative, that can be very distressing, and we can feel very stressed all the time and feel like we're constantly in threat when we're not really in threat. So just knowing about that can really help us. We can understand the science behind why these thinking traps are arising and how to deal with them when they might not be useful. And the last one that I want to mention, because it's quite unique to C Learning as a social emotional learning program, is systems thinking, which is, I mentioned fundamental attribution error, that someone cuts us off or someone's rude to us, for example. And generally, if someone's rude to us, we think they're a rude person. That's the first thing, for many of us, that's the first place our mind jumps to. This person's rude to me, they must be a rude person. When we're rude to somebody else or someone else perceives us as being rude, we usually don't say, oh, I'm a rude person. If someone says, why did you act that way? That was rude. We generally don't respond by saying, oh, because I'm a rude person. Never heard anybody say that. It's usually because we talk about situational factors. Oh, I'm sorry, I was in a hurry, or I wasn't trying to be rude. That's just the way I talk. Or I didn't know that you needed this thing, or I didn't know you were in this situation. Otherwise, I would have acted differently. So we create these explanations. So systems thinking is a way of, instead of just focusing on the one incident, looking outside, looking at the whole system, looking at the situation, examining interdependence, looking for multiple perspectives, exploring complexity. and having epistemic humility. And what epistemic humility means is that instead of just automatically assuming that the way we think things are the way they are, we have humility, a kind of intellectual humility, and we think, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm only seeing part of the picture. And that allows us to see more deeply. Yes, it's true that some people do respond by saying, well, I'm just rude. And especially kids can do that. Maybe adults are less inclined to see themselves as rude. So I wonder, whether you have found ways of dealing with thinking traps. Have you ever? Are there any strategies that you use in dealing with thinking traps? And if you are willing, please share that in the chat. What strategies do you use to get around thinking traps? And it may be that you've never thought about this. It may be that you've never used a strategy, which is totally fine. But it may be that you have noticed that your mind has a tendency to go in a certain direction, and you have deliberately used strategies to deal with that. People who do develop strategies for dealing with thinking traps are often people who struggle. So if a person who has struggled with addiction, a person who struggled with depression, with anxiety, people who have struggled with suicidal ideation, people who have been through psychotherapy sometimes, they have recognized that their minds play tricks on them. And because of that, sometimes through necessity, through their own resilience, they have developed ways of strategies of dealing with that. Somebody once told me, a person who struggled with depression said that, they learned to recognize the signs of the depression coming, and rather than struggling so much with it, almost kind of acknowledging that this is, part of their chemistry, a part of their life, and kind of greeting the depression like an old friend, saying, "Oh, here comes my depression again, but I know better how to deal with you," and that was really interesting. So that's kind of a strategy, recognizing the signs of when our minds are going in a certain direction. So Han-Chin mentioned taking a step back and looking at the big picture, which is great. That's a fantastic strategy. It's in line with the systems thinking approach. And we've got here also Elin, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, says, firstly, we show empathy by acknowledging the matter, then with soft tone offer help. Yeah, this is great. So if you know someone else is in a thinking trap, this is a great way of dealing with it, which is showing empathy to them, acknowledging the situation, and then offering to help gently. And we can also do that with ourselves too, which is being gentle towards ourselves if we fall into a thinking trap. So if anyone else has other suggestions or experience with this, please feel free to add that to the chat. I'll just read the next two. Distracting myself by doing something that requires focus and keeping my mind off it as long as I can. This is great. Distraction works, actually. I mean, there's a lot of research in psychology. Some people might look at this and say, well, you're just distracting yourself. You're not dealing with the problem in a deeper sense. But actually, distraction can be a very effective strategy to use, and might give you enough time to then, be able to take a step back. So knowing how to strategically distract yourself is actually a great skill. It's a great sign of emotional intelligence, in my opinion, if you know how to strategically distract yourself. Thinking for a while before taking action. which is great. So taking that pause, not reacting right away, but giving yourself the pause. And then this is a great one from Sui Ki. I listen to happy music if I feel lousy. So taking an active intervention, you notice that you're feeling lousy, and listening to some music to uplift your mind and your body. So these are all great strategies. So someone mentioned their son struggling. One of the things that has been brought to my attention a lot these past 10 years since I've been working in international education is that very much in the US, but actually all around the world, we are seeing rising rates of depression, anxiety, and attempted suicide among adolescents, teens, and youth. This exploring these types of issues might be more of an optional thing if we weren't seeing this, but we're really seeing an epidemic. We're seeing kids at younger and younger ages being diagnosed for depression, anxiety, being medicated. We are, for example, adolescent girls, the statistics are showing that just within a 12-year period, attempted suicide among adolescent girls has gone up by 300%. This is really shocking. In Japan, since 1998, there was been a real spike in suicide rates among adolescents. Suicide went up by 50% among young people in a single year. My wife actually just finished writing a book on this topic, loneliness and suicide in Japan. But this is happening all around the world. I'm going to show a slide also on the studies done in Malaysia. We're seeing increasing challenges for youth in that, for whatever reasons, there might be multiple reasons, children are under a lot of pressure, a lot of strain, children and youth, up to their 20s. And we don't know why this is happening, but we have to do something to address it. The second reason why we might want to focus on soft skills, on social and emotional intelligence, is that employers are saying that they're looking for employees, they're looking for young people coming out of secondary school and post-secondary education who have soft skills, who know how to get along with other people, who know how to work with other people, who have integrity and so forth. And there are increasing complaints among employers that universities, colleges, and secondary schools are not graduating students with sufficient attention to soft skills. And the third reason we might say why it's important to focus on social emotional intelligence is that young people are going to be facing challenges in the coming century that are really unprecedented. Climate change, conflict, justice and social justice issues that we've seen. These are unprecedented challenges that the coming generations are going to have to face. And we have to ask ourselves whether we are fully preparing them to meet those challenges. And if we're not, we need to think about our educational processes. So these are all, from the perspective of myself and others who work in this field, these are all very strong reasons why we might want to focus on teaching soft skills and social and emotional skills. So I mentioned Malaysia. I'm not as familiar with this research in Malaysia, but I did take a look at this. For those of you who don't know, my family are actually from Malaysia, mainly in KL. Many of them are on this call. Thank you all for joining. But I grew up in the States, but I've spent time in Malaysia over the course of my life, and unfortunately, we are seeing these same trends in Malaysia as well. So this is just a recent article that I was looking at on the prevalence of depression among very young people, children under 18 years of age. And this study found that 16%, 12%, and almost 4% of people under 18 had mild, moderate, or severe depression. And this is really unfortunate, and really this is not something we should see as acceptable, in my opinion. We should be doing everything we can to stop the epidemic of mental health struggles that children are facing, because this is something that affects these children throughout their entire lifespan. And as these authors say at the beginning of their article, depression is the single largest contributor to the global burden of disease. And we know that depression is associated with a lot of other negative health outcomes. And there's high comorbidity of depression with other problems kind of that we would consider to be more physical health problems. So when we talk about soft skills, we're talking about, dealing with thinking traps, having empathy, having self-regulation, self-control, responsibility, integrity, emotional intelligence, cooperation, compassion, the skills that some people call them life skills rather than soft skills. But that in addition to learning science, technology, and so forth, these are skills that we believe should be able to help kids get through life, not just individually, but also collectively, and become global citizens that are well equipped to deal with the challenges that they are already facing and they will face. So my question, to you is, what do you think? Do you think we should teach soft skills in schools and universities? Most of our schools and universities at present do not teach soft skills. Should we be teaching these? What do you think? Why or why not? So please share in the chat. I see that somebody mentioned, yes, during the pandemic, the numbers are becoming worse. It's early to see that, but so far there have been a few studies, and it definitely seems that the COVID pandemic has shown a spike in self-reported loneliness and a lot of other problems, and even a spike in suicide. So feel free to continue responding to that prompt in the chat. I appreciate all of you who are responding. So just going to show results of another a meta-analysis. So a meta-analysis is when researchers go out and they try and find all the studies on a particular topic, they synthesize those findings, and they use statistical methods to see what emerges when you look at all the studies in a particular area, usually studies that meet certain criteria. So Gerlach and his colleagues did a meta-analysis on all the social and emotional learning programming that they could find. This included data from more than 270,000 students, as it shows here. And they combed through all that data, they put it all together, and they said two major findings stood out for them. So this is to address the question, can we teach social and emotional skills? Can we teach soft skills? And do they have any effects when we try to teach them? So what they found was that students who participated, when they aggregated all this data, students who participated in social emotional learning programs showed significantly more positive outcomes with respect to social emotional learning skills, attitudes, positive social behavior, and academic performance, and significantly lower levels of conduct problems and emotional distress. On average, it was about a 10% increase in positive social behavior, pro-social behavior like helping and cooperation, and a 10% decrease in conduct problems. And interestingly enough, they also saw an 11% difference in academic achievement. And that's important because I noticed most people in the chat are saying, yes, we should do this. But one of the main questions that arises is, well, if we introduce social emotional learning, what are we taking out of the curriculum? We don't want to take out math. We don't want to take out science. We don't want to take out history. There's only so much time in the day. So if we're going to be having the kids or the college students, be learning this material, exploring this material, talking about this material for 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 hours a week, what are we losing? Because we can't add hours to the day. And a lot of people think, we're going to see a decrease in academic achievement if we do this. And so I think this finding is very encouraging, because it suggests that when you give students ways of dealing with their stress and dealing with their emotional, issues that they're dealing with, if you teach them social skills so they can get along better with each other, with their families, with their teachers, their classmates, that this actually might translate into helping them achieve their academic goals as well. And of course, that only makes sense because all of the emotional and social stress that the students are going through can't be helping them academically. But it's great to see that the research is also supporting that. So I'm going to return a little bit. We talked a little bit about thinking traps. And what is interesting is that a lot of the methods that you shared in dealing with thinking traps, some of those methods involve doing things that would calm the body, taking a break, listening to music, things like that. And one of the things that's important in C-learning is exploring this connection between the mind and the body, that they are closely connected. So we use a model in C-learning that we borrowed from our colleagues at a place called the Trauma Resource Institute. They kindly lent us this model and have trained our team and allowed us to put this into our program. And it's a model that talks about the resilience zone. It talks about the way our nervous system operates and deals with stress through something called the resilience zone, a very easy mental model we can use. So resilience is the ability to respond in a productive way to challenges, stress, threats, unexpected surprises that might otherwise destabilize us. So if we think about resilience, as we're going through the day, we can think about ourselves as being like this green line. We're going through the day. Sometimes we're getting a little more stressed, we're getting a little more activated, we're moving up on the line. Sometimes we're kind of calming down, we're a little more relaxed, or we're feeling a little more tired, we're going down. And generally we're kind of coasting through the day like that, but we're able to basically feel ourselves and our best self. But occasionally something happens in the day that bumps us out of our resilience zone. And we get bumped into, for example, the high zone, right? So something stressful happens or something builds up and we got knocked out of the resilience zone where we feel in control, where we feel our best self, and we get stuck in the high zone. So without me describing to you what that is, being stuck in the high zone, I wonder if you can guess what it feels like to be stuck in the high zone, to be bumped out of your resilience zone by a stressor, a stressful event or a stressful person, and you get knocked out and you get stuck in your high zone. What do you think it would look like or feel like for someone to be stuck in their high zone? And please feel free to put this into the chat. Helpless. Yeah. Frustrated, anxious. Uh-huh. Feeling sick in your stomach, yeah. Mixed emotions of negativity. Yeah, these are all great. Other examples that people sometimes say are fear. You might feel out of control, anger, strong emotions. Maybe, yeah, some low motivation. Vincent says you can't be there forever. That's right. Scared, losing sleep. Yeah. So if this goes on for a while, let's say you get bumped into your high zone for days or weeks, which can happen. This could really start affecting your sleep, your digestion, your appetite, lots of things. Now, if I were to tell you that also part of our model is something called low zone, someone who gets bumped into their high zone might crash and get stuck in the low zone and be stuck in the low zone. And without me describing that to you, I wonder if you can imagine what it might be like to be stuck in the low zone because of stress. Have you ever felt that way, or have you seen somebody who just seemed to be stuck in their low zone? What might that be like? Yeah, so Sweetie said, nothing excites me. That's a great one. Low energy, not feeling like doing anything. Yeah. Yeah, if somebody feeling lifeless is great. If somebody just, usually they get excited to do something, they want to, go out, they want to eat good food or listen to music or be with friends. And then you notice you're talking to them and they say, no, I don't feel like doing any of those things. I don't want to go out and see people. I don't want to meet with people. I don't want to, you try and bring them their favorite food and they just look at it and they don't seem that excited. Maybe they eat it, but there's no joy. These are all signs of someone being stuck in the low zone. Vincent says, feeling depressed. You may even start to feel suicidal, losing focus, feeling burnt out, feeling like just wanting to end the suffering, feeling sick. Yeah, these are all examples. This is great. Thank you so much. And feel free to continue to comment. Those are all great examples of somebody stuck in their low zone. Now, here's another graphic that we use to talk about this. So whereas generally our bodies and minds would be kind of coursing through the day, something can happen. We can have a traumatic or stressful event. Now, what we know from trauma research is that this doesn't have to be one single event. It can also just be an accumulation of smaller events that build up, and it just reaches the breaking point. You can't take it anymore, and you get pushed. Your body and mind get pushed into the high zone. These are just a few examples of what it could be like in the high zone. You all mentioned most of these. You could get, and then you could crash and get stuck in the low zone. You could alternate between the high and low zone. And the interesting thing is, I didn't really tell you all what our definition of high zone is or low zone, and yet you all knew it. You already knew it. You recognized what it was, and you gave perfect examples of what it feels like to be stuck in the high zone or the low zone. And that is and that makes sense, because this is something that isn't unique to any of us. It's universal because it's based on our bodies. It's based on our nervous system. We all have an autonomic nervous system. We all have a body that is designed to keep us alive and that alternates between parasympathetic and sympathetic activation. More commonly, we know that as the fight or flight, getting ready for something exciting or something stressful happening, or parasympathetic being the rest and digest. It's time to sleep. You're safe. You can relax. You can go to sleep. Our body naturally alternates between these two things. And if that natural alteration of our autonomic nervous system gets dysregulated because of stress, we can get stuck in the high zone or in the low zone. And our nervous system has become overtaxed, is one way of thinking about it. It's just worn out. Its elasticity is being lost because of too much stress. And we start experiencing all these things, both physically and mentally. And we have to help our body get back into that resilient zone. We have to help our body get back to that place of health. And that's going to help our mind as well. As Elin said, maybe we need a massage. That's a great way to feel the release. A massage can help our body feel safe again and get back to that resilient zone. So we can do physical things, we can do mental things, we can do social things to help ourselves get back into that resilient zone. And we can learn these techniques, how to help each other and help others get back to our resilient zone. And we're helping both our physical and our mental health. So at the very beginning of this session, I asked you all to think about something that's been helping you get by, something that's been a resource for you. And by thinking of a resource, something that uplifts you, you can help your body get back to the resilient zone. Sweet Key mentioned listening to good music. We can listen to good music that can help our body get back into the resilient zone. We can get a massage. Here are a couple simple strategies that we give to teachers to work with kids. And these are simple physical activities that we can do and that we can teach others that are called help now strategies, because they can bring immediate help and benefit to ourselves or to others if we notice that we are bumped out of our resilience zone. And Aziz says, what about spiritual? Yes, we can absolutely use spiritual resources. If we are a spiritual person or a religious person, then our religion is going to offer us a whole host of resources that we can use. And we can use those resources as well, whether it's prayer, whether it's going to a mosque or a church, whatever it might be, we can use those resources. But even if we're not religious, there are lots of simple things. Now, here are a couple examples. Slowly drinking a glass of water, feel it in your mouth and throat. What do you notice on the inside? Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Naming 6 colors. Now, this is a really interesting one. I was talking to a neuroscientist who studies the neurophysiology of trauma. I was talking about how when we're in threat, we're not paying attention to colors because we're focused on the threat, or it could be in our mind. We could be so anxious about it that we're not paying attention to our surroundings. So just by noticing colors, looking around, noticing colors, maybe you find one color that you particularly like, and you let your eye just rest on that color. Like I'm actually looking at something that's pink in the room, and it's a very nice shade of pink. And just by looking at that pink color and then seeing how my body responds, I can actually allow my body to slowly calm itself. And that's because I'm breaking the pattern of my nervous system focusing on threat, and I'm looking at a color. And my body thinks if I'm looking at colors and noticing colors, I must not be in danger, because when I'm in danger, when I'm threatened, I'm not focusing on colors. I'm just focusing on the threat. So if I'm paying attention to a nice color, my body actually thinks I must be safe. And again, it's like a strategic distraction in a way that can be very effective. Counting backwards from 10 as you walk slowly around. Number 5 says touching something. So you can look around and just notice something that you might want to touch. You can feel different things and notice how your body responds as you touch that. Sometimes your body's getting too hot, and you feel anxious or you feel angry, and it's really your body getting too hot. And touching something cool or drinking something cool helps your body to feel a little bit safer and calm down. Now you'll notice that all of these have the actual activity or instruction at the top, and then at the bottom, they all have the same question. What do you notice on the inside? Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Because one of the keys is not just learning this technique and using it, but using this technique to improve your body literacy, improve your understanding of your own nervous system and what your nervous system needs. So we don't often pay attention to our bodies enough. So we're not exactly closely paying attention to whether our body is being activated with more sympathetic activation or whether our body is relaxing. And so what using these techniques can do, especially if we pay attention to how our body is responding, if we listen to our body, we can notice what is helping our body relax, what is helping it activate, and we can use that intelligence to help us navigate back into the resilience zone. And it takes time. One of the things about parasympathetic activation, and I'm hesitant to say too much because I know we have many medical doctors on this call who know about this far more than I do, but unlike the sympathetic nervous system, which activates all at once and very quickly, this fight or flight system, the parasympathetic system is distributed and takes time. So we can activate all at once when we notice danger, but we can't just relax all at once. We can't relax the entire body instantaneously. It takes time. So doing these activities and then noticing how our body responds actually can create a cascading effect where we notice the relaxation in one part of the body, we pay attention to that, we allow it to spread, we notice further relaxation, and then gradually our entire body is feeling more relaxed. So we're using our knowledge of the nervous system to navigate our own stress response. And then we're using that navigation of our nervous system to improve our emotional responses to things as well, because of this mind-body connection. So this, I think, is a really exciting aspect of Sea Learning, that you could actually improve emotional intelligence and emotional awareness through the body, as well as through the mind, as we explored earlier. So we're nearing the end of our time. I'm just going to say all of this comes from a program called Sea Learning, Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning, which is a free program that Emory University, my colleagues and I at Emory University have designed in partnership with the Dalai Lama, who sponsors the program and also called for the program because he wanted a free program that would be available to people all throughout the world to introduce social, emotional, and ethical skills in a secular way, meaning in a way open to people of all religions or no religions. So all these resources are free. This is what the curricula look like that are all on our website. And I'll just show you briefly what the website looks like, so that if you want to learn more about the program or get any of these resources, you can get them. On our website, there are the curricula, which have all the lessons. It's about 2 years worth of material, actually, that we've written. There is a free orientation course for parents or teachers. There are parent, teacher, and student activities, and we actually just finished writing a book for students directly, so that can just be distributed to students, even without having a teacher or parent go through them with them. Although it's easiest if you do have an adult helping the student navigate through, especially if they're young. So I'll just end with something I mentioned earlier, which is that in our program, we're trying to combine the head, the heart, and the hand. And we call that awareness, compassion, and engagement. So in our framework for the program, we have these 3 dimensions called awareness, compassion, and engagement. And I mentioned some of the challenges that young people will be facing in the coming generation. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important to have a program like this is because if we teach children just how to, use their head to develop new technologies, new innovation, that's great. If we teach them the skills of how to engage in the world with the hand, that's wonderful. But if we miss the heart, they have no reason to use their intelligence and to use their abilities for the benefit of other people. So an example is the vaccine. These wonderful vaccines that have been developed to deal with the pandemic. It took great intelligence to develop those vaccines. That's the head. The distribution of the vaccines, as we know, is a huge challenge. It takes many, many hands to distribute those vaccines around the world. But what it also takes is the heart to be willing to give those vaccines to the people who need them most, and not use them selfishly, not use these skills just for our own gain. So a holistic education should have all three of these, and that's why we are working on this program and making it available. So thank you all so much for listening, and if we have any more time, we can take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. And we'll go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just now we actually received one question from Aziz Rajab. Okay, so he was asking, nowadays children are more focused and like to live in their zone of gadgets for hours and do less talking and communicating. They refuse to engage in social activities with relatives, families, and teachers. So he would like to ask for your comment, please.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Joyce. My volume is not very high. Could you repeat the question again?
Oh, all right. Okay. The question is actually asking about nowadays children are more focused and like to live in their zone of gadgets for hours and do less talking and communicating. So they refuse to engage in social activities with relatives, families, and friends, and teachers. So he's asking for your comments, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, young people are using technology much more. That's a complicated question. I think it has two parts. I think the easy part, I'll take the easy part first. When we create opportunities for young people to talk about their emotions and their relationships in schools, we found that they're very eager to do that, especially when they reach the level of adolescence. So when kids are reaching adolescence, they become very, very focused on their peers. Any parent knows this, any teacher knows this. Their peers become much more important than the adults in their life, their parents or their teachers or anything like that. So they become very socially focused, but they don't have an opportunity to talk about any of that in school. So our program is now in actually over 1,000 schools around the world in over 30 countries. And what we're hearing from teachers and counselors is that when those young people, adolescents and teenagers and up, are given the opportunity to talk to each other about emotions and relationships and things like this, they actually love that opportunity, because a lot of the stresses they're going through, they think they're going through it alone. And when they hear their peers talk about their struggles with anxiety or depression or negative thinking or any of these things, they suddenly realize they're not alone, and it creates connections among them. So I think it can be a way of eliciting this type of social interaction if the space is created for it. Now, most schools never have that kind of space. I mean, when I was growing up, I didn't attend any classrooms where the teachers had an opportunity to create that space for us. The other part of the question, of course, is that as adults, we need to think a little bit more carefully about the way young people are using technology and the amount of time that they're spending on phones and other types of technology. And I know many parents and adults are very conscious about the way they control screen time for their children, which I think is very wise. But as societies, we haven't introduced a lot of the safety controls, and we don't have a lot of knowledge about how to best allow children to benefit from the technology and yet not be dominated by it. So I think we have a lot of learning to do there. And I don't think the current situation is anywhere near as ideal as it should be.
All right, okay. Thank you so much, Brandon, for this insightful webinar. So now actually we would like to take a group photos with everyone in this webinar. So I appreciate all of you can turn on your camera and stand by. Okay, so on my count, in 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, and then we would like to take another one with the freestyle. Okay, 3, 2, 1, smile. All right. And thank you, Mr. Brandon. Is there anything else you would like to cover up before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank you again, Joyce and Yen, for inviting me, and thanks so much, everybody, for coming. And I see a lot of my family members also came to this call. It's great to see you all. Thank you so much for coming, and thanks for this opportunity to share.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Brandon. And just a reminder for all the participants, please sign out and fill out the evaluation form in the link posted in the chat box. And also, please join us for another session at 12 p.m. today, How to Boost Your Memory by the Grandmaster of Memory, Mr. Wong Wan Jun. Thank you all and stay safe. Bye-bye.